Am I recording? Good. I think I am recording
Yeah.
already.
You just
So
you just
as
you just reminded yourself.
yes, that if you go to YouTube and you do a search on ECC, I'll put it in the chat, ECC space Art Club, you'll find the more than half a dozen lectures we've had. We had two gentlemen that were the designers of SoFi Stadium. We had Rochelle Mills Drake talk about her affordable housing, and we subsequently went to one of her projects last semester downtown, which was very eye-opening, and she brought the developer, the client, and he walked it with us, and it was a lot of information shared on that. It was about 80% done at that point. Really pretty cool. We do have a seminar on there on portfolio development. So I get this from students all the time. Can you help me with portfolio? We actually have that memorialized. Seminar is on there. So that is free and open to everybody to go grab those if you do a search on this. And one really nice lecture we had last semester was Women in Architecture. And we had some pretty prominent movers and shakers. We had Adeze Kadei, which is the lead designer at HOK, and I can say her name because I know her a little personally. I can't name the other two or three, but they shared their experiences in where they are and how they got there to those leadership positions. So that's another lecture that's really worth watching. And again, I can't express enough. The SoFi Stadium one, you could send your friends to that one. Everybody should see that. It was just unbelievable. When I say send your friends that aren't in architecture, they're going to like it.
Yeah.
Because they really broke down the design and the engineering behind it, the landscape design around it. Very cool lecture. I had seen it before and I said, you guys got to do this for us. So
Ruben, was Brother Bain involved with that? I think his name is Steve Bain.
yes. Yep. He was one of the two. And is it Bain is his last name? But it is Steve. Yes. Yes. He was one of the two. He was involved in the construction management of it.
Okay.
So he had seen the whole thing through construction, and one of the early design architects, the two of them did it together.
Oh man.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah. So take a look at that when you get a chance. So that's plugs for things. As I get to now start to move into it, our preamble introduction to Drake as to where he comes from and how I know him. Drake is a longtime member and leader of NOMA, the National Organization of Minority Architects. And I met him through NOMA. Through that, he has been a president of the SoCal NOMA chapter for 8 years running at one point. And he was even president of the whole organization itself at one point. So a great resource. He'll tell you his story of where he's from, how he spent most of his time here in LA. But if I share for a moment just what NOMA is about, NOMA has, if I count them up, a little over 40 professional chapters across the country. And within those chapters, we have started to develop NOMA student chapters, aka NOMAS chapters that fall with under those professional chapters. Now, the professional chapter in LA, known as SoCal NOMA, because we really embody Southern California, and until one of the people on the call here, Michael Robinson, has gotten recently up and running the San Diego chapter. we went as far as there, but really our strongest reach was the OC and the Inland Empire and the LA and kind of Pasadena areas. And we've been pretty strongly running since the mid 80s, of which I got involved after school. And I was like, I didn't know about this. I wish I knew about this in school. And there weren't student chapters back then. But the professional affiliation, the professional mentorship goes on to this day. All the people that I've met have now their lines blur between being mentors, being colleagues, and being associates. And at different days, they're one of the above. So you'll find that that's an interesting thing that should happen in your life with the people you meet. But NOMA is definitely an org where you will find, similar to the AIA, a smaller organization. It was founded by 12 African-American architects that in the early 70s saw that there was really no place for them in the AIA organization, and they formulated this. And those people went back after being at an AIA conference and started chapters in their local communities. And now we've grown 50 years later to be over 40 professional chapters and almost 100 student chapters, of which there's probably a dozen SoCal NOMAS chapters just in Southern California alone. Almost every school is. But it's definitely a time to say, you know, over the years, the demographic of who NOMA is has evolved. So I want to make sure everybody knows it is not exclusive to African Americans. It never was, but that's who formulated it for us, because we didn't have a place, but we've always been inclusive. And right now at this point, once you go to a conference and see what the demographic is made of, from schools such as Yale, as you see, Louisiana Tech, North Carolina State, Georgia Tech, it just goes on and on. There is a wide diversity in ethnicity. It just depends on where you are. The national conference is annual, and it's always either in the mid or late October time of the year, about a 3-day conference, moves from city to city, just as the AIA conference does. And it's really a great place to see people from all over. So it was in LA before I knew a lot of you guys. Actually, Drake was president of the SoCal chapter when we had to put it together for it being in LA. That was 2017, or yeah, 2017. And we really started the quadruple digit number of attendees, because it is now common to have about 1,000 attendees at the conference. And it's virtually about 600 professionals, 400 students from all of these different schools and places you see. And a lot of people go to that event largely because they get a chance to see people from all over. So I'm real excited that 5 of our students, I kind of call it 6 because the 6th student just got transferred to Cal Poly Pomona, but she'll be hanging with us because she knows us. The 6 of our students are going to the conference this year, and they'll really get to see the explosion of connectivity one could have. So that's my kind of spiel on that. And like I said, when you come to the weekly meetings, we'll get more in a deep dive as to what the project is they're doing, and we'll be presenting, show you what we've done last year, as El Camino did do a submittal for the conference that was in Detroit last year. And just things on the horizon that we'll be doing. If you haven't been involved in the club, know that we do tours of buildings under construction, of which I set up last spring, where we got to tour a couple of buildings under construction right there on campus, being that we have a lot of that development happening. And so we did that. The semester before, a lot of students really wanted to see an office, and I managed to get us in an office, even though we were in breaking through COVID, and an office gave us a tour down in Long Beach, Studio 111, Drake, Lance's old firm, and they really showed us everything they do, including designing the space they were in. So we're doing a lot of things that basically you as club members, you say what you want to do, help us coordinate it. And as the three-headed monster that Dan Richardson, Mark Eber, and myself are as faculty advisors for it, help to make these things happen. So keep that in mind. And if I now move into a little specifics in Drake, if you go to the NOMA website, and this is the LA NOMA or SoCal NOMA website, that's socalnoma.org. If you want to go to the national website, it's noma.net. But on our page, we have him prominently displayed because he is a past president that has been heavily involved with the organization at large, our community that he's going to speak about in this project. He's lived in it for a good 40 years and can really give you more on that. But as I said, what's really a cool thing is meeting him through NOMA in the years that he was president. They gave me the power to do event coordination for the SoCal NOMA chapter, and Drake put his weight behind things that we tried to do, including in 2017, we had a big lecture at El Camino College where we had the lead architect that coordinated the African American Museum design actually do a full-blown lecture, and SoCal NOMA paid for that. So without further ado, I'm going to let Drake talk a little bit more about himself before he talks about the project he's going into. And I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Ruben. I learned some things about myself from you. So I appreciate that. Ruben and I have a great history together. I go back a little bit further than Ruben, I must say. I came out of school in '76, so I'm dating myself. But in 1976, I came out to California. That's where it all started for me in terms of my professional career. And let me see, is my screen up?
Yes.
Okay, let me go into presentation mode here. There it is. I'm going the wrong way. Okay. You should see a pretty much a black screen with a picture of me. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. So let's get going. As I was indicating, I moved from DC to California in 1976. Was involved in NOMA before then. So Ruben, you might not know this, but my first contact with NOMA was in college, and I've been active ever since. It's been no break. It's been a great organization that supported me, and now I'm supporting others. So that's what it should be about. I'm originally from Chicago, as I think Ruben indicated. Attended the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. I received my bachelor's degree from there. So born and raised in Chicago, went to University of Illinois, graduated undergraduate in 1974. And then went to Howard University. This is my high school here. This is Wendell Phillips High School. I had a drafting teacher, Mr. Scott, who introduced me to architecture. I didn't know anything about it at the time, and we had drafting classes in high school. And that's how I got my first love for it. So I wanted to recognize him. Again, I was invited back to University of Illinois in 2016 as a keynote speaker. And unfortunately, I must say this, had not too many things changed from when I graduated in terms of in 2016. When I was there, there was roughly a handful of African-American students. That's including all years. And when I returned in 2016 for the keynote position, there were roughly 3. So that's not good. From there, I went to Howard for my master's degree. So from 74 to 76. And of course, I put this picture here on the right-hand side because that's the picture of the Howard band, marching band. And the person in that car, as you probably all know, is Kamala Harris, the vice president, who attended Howard. And you can see on to the left is a nice campus shot of Howard as well. This is a relatively old picture. There's a lot of new buildings on campus now that's not included in this picture. Campus has grown tremendously. The enrollment has grown tremendously, and now it's pretty difficult to get in. Just to pay some acknowledge some of the people along my journey here. As I mentioned, Mr. Scott was a high school teacher. Andrew Hurd was the first architectural firm I worked for back in Chicago. He was my mentor and still living, still around. Harold Williams is one of the NOMA founders. He passed just recently. Bill Wallace is one of my teachers. Melvin Mitchell was from California, from LA actually. And he was also a teacher of mine at Howard University. And Bob Kennard was one of the first gentlemen I worked for in LA. He attended USC as well, I believe. And he's passed as well. And then I put down here Paul Williams because he's always was an uplift for me. At Howard, there was a picture of Paul Williams. It was an example of excellence in terms of design and architecture. So we had examples of that at Howard. Other institutions might not acknowledge that, but Howard did. So I'm switching here real quickly to Perkins and Will. I want to talk a little bit about the firm that I work for now. And as Ruben alluded to, the National Museum of African American History and Culture was actually designed by one of our principals with the Freeline Group, and that's Phil Freeline, who unfortunately passed away. But the pictures you see here are pictures of the building in DC. It was done by a host of architects, Phil Freeline, David Adjei, and Smith Group, and Bond. Perkins and Will has roughly, I think this number has grown up, but roughly I would say 2,300 staff around the world. You see here we have roughly 23 studios. I think we have more now, but they're national as well as international. And we the disciplines that we have is architecture, interior design, brand and environments, planning, strategies, and urban design. And then again, we founded in 1935, and practice areas include healthcare, corporate, commercial, higher education, K through 12 education, transportation, sports and recreation, and housing. We did not have housing for a long time, but now we have included housing as well. I'm going to talk about the civil and culture component of our practice, design that reflect the identity and the needs of the community. And in some cases, people say this is urban design, but I think the civic and culture is more important. way of describing it. I wanted to start off with showing you an example of a project that I really like. This Destination Crenshaw is coming up, but I wanted to show this first because it's a project I think it tells a great story, and that's important. I think when you design, sometimes you need to look at design as telling a story, not just so much a visual story, but it's telling the story of the community, it's telling the story of the people, it's telling the story of the culture. So when you look at this slide, you see pretty much, this is in North Carolina and in the South, and you see a very lush, landscape, lots of trees. You can see the river at the bottom on the right-hand side here, and pay attention to this river. And you can see there's a bridge going across the river right here. Can you see my arrow?
Yes.
Yeah. I deliberately made the arrow purple for a purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, we know. We know.
Yeah, I know. But so this is a very plush area. You can see there's housing, there's commerce, there's a community, there's people down there. There's a community. Pay attention to this group of trees right here. So you have this group of trees, you have this bridge going across the water, you have the river right here, and you have this block of lush landscape with houses. I'm sure there's a school in there someplace and other things as well. So when we look at this picture, this is the picture obviously of the past. And then we're going to go to the next picture, which is going to show you some more detail of that particular site. And there's a Baptist church, a Sycamore Hill Missionary Baptist Church. If I go back one slide, if right here where I mentioned this bridge and this tree right here, that's where that church is located, right in that corner. You can't see it there, but just trust me, it's there. And this is how it looks. It's bricks, stained glass, beautiful Baptist church. You can see the congregation below it here. People, I'm sure every Sunday will go and come out in groups. And you can also see some of the houses down the churches in the back here. And you can see some of the residents in the houses. A very active, very proud community. And then as we move forward, another slide, this is the future. This is what we call urban renewal. And most of us know that during this period of urban renewal, it became labeled as a term we use for that, which we said urban removal. And this is a good example of that, how that term was arrived in terms of all that community was removed as part of this urban renewal. The only thing that remained, and here's that river I referred to, and there's that bridge again. And the only thing remaining is this church right here. There's the trees I referred to. They're not as lush as they were before, but they're still there. They're hanging in there. And the church is there. All the homes are pretty much gone. There's still some things back there, but mostly everything is gone. And then the next slide here, and I'm sorry, I missed this here. My picture was in the way here. And we go to the right, we can see that eventually the church came down. And the church was, it looked like it was actually a controlled demolition of the church, where they basically just tore it down, which is really, really sad. There's a lot of history in that church. And there's a lot of memories, and I'm sure there were funerals there. Just sad situation. We were hired, Perkins Will was hired as a firm to help this community with designing something in recognition of this community. This large site here was designated to become a park. And so that part of this urban renewal, I hate using that word, but was to make this a park. And the people complain about obviously the destruction and the history being destroyed. And they wanted this park to have something in it to indicate the history of this area. And they hired Perkins Will, an architecture firm, to help them with doing that. And what I want to show you is our approach to doing that in a few slides, and then I'm going to go into Destination Crenshaw. But this is a site plan here of this park. And of course, green is letting you know the park is huge, and this is just a corner. This is the corner where the church used to be. And we wanted to acknowledge that corner of the park. The rest of the park is green and beautiful, but we wanted to acknowledge the corner of the site of the park where the church was located, and basically design a memorial to the church, but also to the history and the culture of the community. So we use this area as it's almost like a museum, and it tells that history. So here you could kind of see it's somewhat of a slope area here where you walk upstairs here. This is a paved area, and you have some walls that allude to the fact that there used to be a church here. You see the stained glass, and these glass are placed in locations where the church actually, the walls, the exterior walls were actually there. You can see the park in the back with a nice landscape area, trees and grass. But you can also see some of these walls, there's information on them which tells the story of the community that once lived there. And also stories about the church as well. So the next slide gives you a different image of that corner of the site. And now you can see how you're stepping up to go to where the church was. You're beginning to see tall stained glass, small stained glass. And you could also see the beginning of certain plaques with information on the walls. And then the next one here, you go inside the area where the church actually stood. And you're now looking at the park benches that we call right here, the church pews, where people would be placed in space that was once the church sanctuary. And you can envision people in the church, and up here in the middle was where the preacher was. It almost gives you the feeling that you're in church, but you're not. And you also could see that there's plaques on the walls of the site that I showed you, and also some history about the community and the people that once lived there. What's just one of my favorite projects, because it really tells how you could include the culture in our designs if we're sensitive to it. And this just shows one approach to that. So I wanted to share that with you. We don't normally show it, but I wanted to share it with you, but I think it's very important. But now I'm going to go into Destination Crenshaw. And trying to get rid of this thing off to the side here. Let me go down here. There you go. So Destination Crenshaw. Before we do that, I wanted to just acknowledge the team. Of course, Perkins Will is the architect on the project. The landscape architect, Studio MLA, these are the same consultants who designed the landscape for SoFi. And it's also a woman-owned firm. And they do great work around the city. Gallagher is an exhibit design firm that is also part of our team. The project team from Perkins Will and some of our consultants are here on this particular slide. Gabrielle Bullock, Phil Freeline, who passed away. Zena Howard was the person that Ruben alluded to earlier, who came out and spoke about the museum. Of course, myself, Roland Wiley, and a host of other people there. We also had an advisory council. This is the group of the advisory council. This is probably the very important group here. And I say that because, you know, one would like to just go into a room and design a project by themselves, but life doesn't quite work that way. There's a lot of fingers who want something to say about what happened. So this particular group was a group made up of people from the community, leaders. There was artists. There's a gardener. Ron Finley, he called himself the gangster gardener right here. We have a young artist. We wanted to make sure there were young people involved as well as women and men, a diverse group of people. And we have a historian right here. We have curators. And probably one of the most important people, which you would not like me saying that, but this is Councilman Marquise Harris Dawson of District 88. And this was really his dream. He really brought this project to the table. He hired us to help him make it real. And we're under construction as I speak tonight. And so that's Marquise Harris Dawson. And just the names of the people on the council. You might notice the name down here, Nipsey Hussle. He was also a member of this advisory council, and he was very involved in the project. He supported the project. We'll talk a little bit more about him later. Getting to where we are today, there were several and many community meetings. We had meetings that were small groups. We had large town hall meetings, hundreds of people. We went to schools and met with the students, as you can see here. And we also met with seniors. We wanted to make sure this project represents the community, and they were involved in the process. They were involved in the process. Again, this is pictures of meetings where we just listened. We just had people, had them talk, and we listened, took notes, called a listening meeting. The project, just for the orientation of the project, downtown is way up here at the top right-hand side. This blue line here is the Metro line going down Exposition that exists today. So you could take it from downtown all the way to Santa Monica. I take it to go to the soccer games over in Exposition Park, which is around here. So it's an active line. The new line that was proposed and it's on the way now is the Crenshaw line. The Crenshaw line is a new line that starts at the Exposition line on Crenshaw and Exposition. And the purpose of this line is to take people to the airport, LAX, indicated right here. Now this line, this Metro line, has some interesting history. I'm going to be very quick about it, but it's important because it's why we have this project, which is right here in this pink area, Destination Crenshaw. This line, again, the purpose was to take people from downtown, I guess as well as Santa Monica, and they could catch this line and then go to the airport. Well, at the time, this particular line did not have a stop at Leimert Park. It did not have a stop at the Crenshaw Mall. And the line was all above grade. It was all above grade because at the time, Metro did not want to spend money on having a line undergrade. And so there was a lot of pushback from the community. Basically, indicating that this metro line is going to divide the community. There's a lot of history when it comes to metro lines and railroad tracks and freeways in terms of how we divide areas up and communities. So there's a lot of pushback in terms of the metro line being above grade and also not stopping within the community. So fast forward, after protests and letters and marches and all those things, the compromise was, we're going to have the first few miles of the metro underground, which is indicated with this dotted line here. But that's a lot of money to do that. So once you leave Leimert Park, the freeway comes above ground, which is right here. And then it stays above ground until it turns to go into Inglewood. It goes down again. And then it comes back up. And then at certain intersections on La Brea, it goes above grade, crossing La Brea, and then it goes into the airport. So there's some below grade, above grade, blah, blah, blah. So in this particular area here, this is District 8, and this is Marquise Harris Dawson's district. This is not his district. This is not his district. This is District 10. So in his district, he wanted to do something about this metro line above grade, what he called making lemonade out of lemons. That's how he termed it. He wanted to make something positive out of this metro line that goes above grade and being an eyesore in the community. And that's how Destination Crenshaw basically was born. You see that over here, where we basically have the 1.3 mile from Leimert Park here, all the way down to Slauson in this area right here. And you also see here, a more detailed drawing of Crenshaw, which is this way. This is Leimert Park over here, and this is Slauson down here. But before we go into that, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the project. It's a 1.3 mile outdoor art corridor built along Crenshaw Boulevard, the new metro line at street level, a first of its kind celebrating Black LA. The open air public art and cultural experience will tell the countless and too often overlooked stories of the great contributions African Americans made to LA and the world at large. The design of the Destination Crenshaw is driven by a unifying theme: grow where you plant it. Inspired by the African giant star grass, and I'm going to show that later, used by slavers as beddings in ships. The grass thrive in the alien lands despite inhospitable conditions. Today, it remains a profoundly reminder of the African American history, the path of global desperation and Black resilience in the force of violence and racism. Like the giant star grass, the Black LA community has irrepressible roots that have flourished and spread across the globe. The advisory council was very strong about having a project that was very unapologetically Black LA. And you kind of see that here. The park was divided up into 4 parts. Togetherness around Leimert Park. That's the location where people are gathered, they come together. Dreams was the second theme. Dream is located around Crenshaw High School and also the wall. And the idea is here is to dream of the future, dream big, and this is with our youth. The third one is first. And with this one, the idea was to talk about, the first Black mayor, the first African-American architect, Paul Williams, things like that. And then the last one here on Slauson is improvisation. And this is the one that Nipsey's shop was located in this area. And because of his involvement and also because of his shop there, improvisation was kind of for the creative type, the entertainment, the creative part of our community. So we labeled that improvisation for this part here. 10 pocket parks. We have 8 large-scale artist installations. These are like huge sculpture pieces, 50+ murals, and many, many stories being told. We can't forget, though, that this project is also about landscape. And again, remember, the community wanted this relationship to Black LA, but also to Africa. So a lot of the plants here are native California plants, but half of them are African organized plants that come from Africa as an origin from the plants. Crenshaw, if you can recall it back in the day, had trees in the middle of the street, huge, tall trees on both sides of the street. When Metro came years ago, those trees were taken out. When the shuttle came down Crenshaw to go to Exposition Park, more trees were taken out. So for the past, 3 years, 4 years, it's been hardly no trees on Crenshaw. So this project will bring back not just the art and the sculpture and the stories, but would also bring back the landscape as well. So going back to the giant star grass, this picture here, I like this picture a lot because it reminds me of what I showed you before in North Carolina. There's a book, there's a story, which I won't go into the detail of it, but it goes back to the idea of this grass, this root system. This grass is like, I don't want to say it's like a weed, that's kind of negative, but I like to look at it as being strong. You could pull this out of the grass and you see how the root system goes in both directions. You could pull it out, replant it, and it continues to grow in both directions. You pull it out again, plant it, it grows in both directions. We use that as a symbolism of the community in terms of our history and as a people. No matter where we are, no matter who we are, we strive and we continue to strive. When you look at this grass and you look at how the grass penetrates the earth and goes up to the sun, it's kind of like life. And we're going to use this as a design language in our design to tie our project back to this grass, which was the grass used as bedding on the slave ships that I referred to earlier. So this is a plan of the pavement of one of our pocket parks. And here I'm just showing this slide because it symbolizes what I just said. In the pavement area, we're using that root system with a dark line as part of this root system that goes up and down Crenshaw. And then penetrating the pavement and going up are these shade structures, which is symbolic of the grass that I indicated before. So we're going from this to that. So along this 1.3 mile, in these pocket parks that you would always see the pavement expressed this way and the shade structures expressed this way as well. So when you look up at it from a section or an elevation, you can now see the pavement expressing that grass system along the pavement here, and the grass as shade structures, which is symbolic of Destination Crenshaw. This is one of our pocket parks. I believe it's on 53rd. This is another pocket park, again, using the same symbolism. This is a pocket park for the youth, for our kids. It's kind of a play area along some Slauson. And you can see here, there's a play mound here for kids. And there's also some climbing bars here for kids as well. And you see the shade structures and also the grass roots here. On the walls, there's a plaque for a quote. And also there's some art along the back wall as well. This is actually a pocket park called The Wall. This actually exists. This is called The Wall today. And the art that you see here is actually on the wall right now. We have enhanced the wall. We changed the stairs going up. The stairs go this way to the right, but we changed them to go to the left because up here, we created a little small parklet on the top where you can see the shade structures. And there's a great view of downtown LA from here. And we also included a cap on the top of the wall so light will shine down the wall at nighttime. So at nighttime, this will be lit up. Then we also added some corten steel, and you're going to see corten steel used throughout the project. It's hard to read it, but up here it indicates the wall, the name of this particular pocket park. Crenshaw High School is across the street and down the street going to your left. So a lot of students pass by this area. This is a pocket park. Actually, it's kind of an interesting pocket park. It's across the street from the wall. If I go back to the wall, you'll notice that it's hard to see it, but this is the wall and this is the curb. And then this is Crenshaw. So there's not much room from the wall and the curb to really see the whole wall. The wall goes all the way down the block. It's huge. So in order to have a better view of the wall, we decided to do something across the street and elevate it higher so that you could basically take a view of the wall from a higher pedestal across the street. The wall is basically, it's a storytelling of the Middle Passage from Africa to the United States to California. And if you start at one end, it starts off in Africa and it goes through some history and some moments in our LA history to today. A good example in terms of how it starts off in the way that we try to incorporate technology with our design, we have an app for the phone system where this particular wall will become interactive with your phone. If you go to the beginning here and you use the app and tap the wall, there's a ship, there's a painted ship going across the waters. And when you use the app, the ship comes alive and the water starts to move and begin to tell you the story. And you could do that all along the wall here. If you look at this guy right here, most of you don't know who this guy represents or what he's about, but he's dressed a certain way with stripes. And he's doing a dance. And I'm dating myself. Probably Ruben would be the only one who knows. But he's doing a dance called locking. It's called locking. And it's called locking because this dance was actually a national dance. It was on television and people did it all the time. And they call it locking because this guy attended Locke High School and they named it locking after Locke High School. So when using the app on your phone for this, if you tap this guy on the wall, he began to show you the dance. He actually started dancing, showing you the dance. And it tells the story of how locking started. And it all goes back to LA, the history of LA. There's just some fantastic stories I learned about since being part of this project. Again, going back across the street, as I mentioned, this particular park, we wanted to elevate you so that now you're higher and you could now look across the street going to your left and see a better picture of the wall. We also, on this park, as you can see how now the shade structures are taking on more information. We call these blades on the shade structures, and they give you information about certain things. You see the pavement with the grass treatment, and you now see more sculptured pieces along the parks as well. All the sculpture pieces are done by local artists. They might not live in LA, but they were born and raised in LA. That's a requirement. Some are very, very big names. This is a Park by Crenshaw High School, and this is so the students at Crenshaw can have their own park, and they can also do their own artwork as well. Another park. Again, the same thing, sculpture piece in the middle there. And then we're going to talk about, this is our flagship, Sankofa Park, around Leimert Park, across the street from Leimert Park. Basically, it's unique. It's a ramp. It's basically a ramp that goes from the ground level and it ramps up to the second level so that you can basically have viewpoints. You can look north and see the Hollywood sign. You can look down Crenshaw south and see the Metro line as well as the other parks. Or you can look down in the middle and see the park as it's being used for celebrations, protests, whatever the community wants to do. It's a gathering spot. And that's the main purpose of this park. Now, by now, you know, this is not your typical architecture. There is no building here. It's a ramp, basically. It's a structure. And people are using it. It's another view of it here. Crenshaw going south, Crenshaw going north. And this is the Metro line. I mentioned to you before, the Metro line is underground. As it leaves Leimert Park, right here, it comes above grade. And that's where we start our 1.3 mile for Destination Crenshaw. The Metro line goes above grade and down Crenshaw. And you can now see some of the landscape that's coming back, new landscape, and the street comes alive. Here's the ramp, you enter it here. There's a sculpture piece here. You go up the ramp this way, up to the top here. There's room for a sculpture piece here. This is the spot where you can actually sit down, look down to the lower level. And then here, you look back down at Crenshaw from this point here. And there's some stairs that take you back down. This is one of the sculpture pieces, and you can see how massive it is. This is actually a placeholder. The artist who's doing this sculpture piece, this piece is actually down south. It's already been made, it's down. It's not gonna be here, but he's the artist for the piece. And what he has done with his particular style of work is replacing the idea of horses and only white generals are on horse top. And on this one, he has a horse with a brother on top with a hoodie on, braids, with blue jeans, with holes in them. And this is something that is already been done. It's a fantastic piece of art, a sculpture piece, very on large scale. This is the same artist who painted Obama's portrait, where he's sitting down in flowers, same artist. Kehinde Wiley is his name. What he's doing for us on this particular site is a horse again, but he's going to have a female riding sad saddle on the horse. It's a sister, She's going to be looking back over her shoulder as she's riding forward. And there's the symbolism in that is the symbolism with Sankofa. Sankofa is this bird. It's kind of an African bird that flies forward while looking backwards, basically symbolizing as you move forward, remember your past, remember your ancestors, don't forget. So this woman on the horse is basically repeating that story of I'm riding forward, but I'm looking back, and the importance of that. It's one of my favorites. At the bottom of the ramp, again, is a ball, pink ball, which the artist for this particular piece, the color pink has certain spiritual feelings and healings to it, and this symbolizes that. This is another piece on the ramp at the bottom. Crenshaw is actually right here. So this particular piece is kind of recognizing the car culture of the past Crenshaw. I shouldn't say past because there's still car culture is still there, but this is toward the car culture of Crenshaw. They will not be silver like this. These cars will be colored. So this is still in an early stage here, but this will be colored and things, but they're different cars. And then this is another piece, a female artist, sculpture of a man. And so you can see how people can use the site below any way they want to, whether it's someone, there's a lot of drumming in Leimert Park. I predict that there will be drumming in this park. Down here, there will be drum circles. There will be protests. There will be celebration. There will be dancing. And again, it's a people's park to use the way they want to. It's another view of it. Another view. You see this view a lot. That's probably the most common view right here. I don't know why, but it's used a lot. And that's it. This is something I threw in there. It's kind of the best kept secret in town. There's a memorial toward Paul Williams that I think most people don't know exists. And this is me in front of it. Not to say I'm trying to equate myself with Paul Williams, but he's one of my favorites. And I think with that, Ruben, I'm not sure how long I took, I'm sorry, but we can maybe go into some Q&A.
Oh yeah, it was definitely condensed and brief. And with that, I certainly would like to open it up to questions. Can you bring back the last shot, which is the great shot of the one before that? Yeah, so people orient themselves.
Okay. Sure.
To the left is looking south down Crenshaw Boulevard.
Correct.
So you have, and that view is going to be pretty dynamic because on that one day in the year, you'll be able to see down to Palos Verdes, right?
That's correct.
Essentially.
That's correct.
And so there you go. And for those that don't really know this area of Crenshaw, just so you know streets, because of course you should get to know it. El Camino College is in the South Bay, but it's around 150 something street. And this is right around 40 something street, 50th street. And of course, time you get to the teens, then you're in downtown LA.
Right.
But this is a community in the middle. And I just would like to give people a little history. Crenshaw Boulevard was designed to be a major boulevard by Mr. Crenshaw and the gentleman that owned the stretch of it from here down to Slauson. So Crenshaw bought the strip from Wilshire where it begins down to here, and that's where some estate-like properties were eventually developed. And quite frankly, the Leimert Park area, which I was startled to find out, Leimert Park Village was designed by the Olmsted brothers,
That's correct.
which
Yeah,
are the sons of the Olmsted that did Central Park.
right.
So where there's a pretty majestic feel to the Leimert Park area. But if you Googled and looked up the history of Crenshaw Boulevard, it was designed to be this wide boulevard, and hence history is repeating itself in its being a major street, because unlike Western, unlike Normandy, and even La Brea, it was the only street that could pull off putting two trains going side by side and still leave you Hawthorne Boulevard, essentially.
Ruben, but what's also a lot of people don't know is that Crenshaw originally had trains on it. There was a rail line going down Crenshaw
In the 50s or
way back. Yeah.
yeah, huh?
So we did a complete circle here. We went from rails to cars back to rail.
Yeah.
And those will know there's a history not spoken of, but Firestone and the like pulled up the rails to get the tires sold and made the car culture that it was from the 60s on. It's
Right.
just that now we've approached the same population that New York City has, and you don't have the rail system to match,
Right.
and they got to do something. So thank goodness for Villagrosa starting to push this needle in this direction some years ago, or we'd really be in trouble. But I will open it up to questions.
Hey, Ruben, just real quick, it wasn't Firestone's a Japanese company. So it wasn't Firestone, it was Goodyear.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Trey,
But I do invite everybody to, in a few seconds, I did a search on Crenshaw and learned the man that bought the strip and how it was developed. And that's how it led to, in a few seconds, finding out that the Olmsted brothers did Leimert Park. And it's like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of history here that I don't even know. So, but yes, let's please.
Crenshaw also has a number of affluent African-American architects who have designed buildings on Crenshaw. Of course, Paul Williams is one, but there's other ones as well. So there's a lot of history there. You know, a lot of historical buildings, particularly as it relates to the African-American community, have been overlooked in the past. There's some who want to correct that now, and there's movement to do more documentation of historical buildings, particularly in this area. So I'm looking forward to that.
Trey,
Yes.
could you go back to that slide that you showed that shows the number of parks really that you used to begin your discussion? And then I want to ask you a question about the Green, I guess that's Greenville project.
That's
Yeah, that particular one. Yeah, that's a very good detailed drawing of what's going to occur, and it kind of tells the story, you know,
Right.
as you stated, about how we should approach design. I guess what was the reasoning behind the urban renewal project on your first project that you showed, and why they removed the entire neighborhood, including that church? What was the justification for that?
Well, that was happening. You know, that was happening all around the country. Urban renewal. I mean, I'm from Chicago, and we had the same thing in Chicago. You know, the approach to urban blight was to tear it down, and urban renewal was basically that solution to that is to, you know, remove everything and then rebuild. A lot of places rebuild. Chicago, a lot of times, you know, we need to look at, most things have been done before. A lot of times you need to look either over in Europe or look elsewhere and to see what they have done for certain things. But for us, when you look at New York, when you look at Chicago, they all went through this period of blight, urban blight. You know, how do you fix it? Urban renewal, and then it became urban removal. Then you had people moving away, people were in the city, people moved to the suburbs, from the suburbs, they moved back to the city. I mean, all these cities kind of go through these different pattern changes, and there's some continuity in how they do that. So there's nothing new here. This is something that was going on across the country. A lot
In the
of
50s and the like.
yeah,
A
exactly.
question I have on that, when they demolished that church, was it at the same time the urban renewal was happening, or did they demolish it first and then there was the thought of renewal later?
No, the renewal had happened. That's why it was pretty much blighted. Everything was gone. They removed everything. The church just probably had, it had so much. People had so much feelings for it. They were probably frightened to tear it down. But it was probably the last one to go. But it had happened already.
Mhm.
And now after that, when you start talking about what do we do with everything, in some cases in Chicago, they rebuilt. They rebuilt new housing. You get into housing, affordable housing versus market rate. Sometimes the housing that they redo, it's not the same not economically sound type of financial house that a person could pay for that used to live there. So therefore, the community changes. It changes from Black to another group. So you get that happened back in the 60s, like we say. It's happening today as well.
And hopefully in some communities we're learning from it, where you have significant buildings like that, they would be repurposed instead of just demolished, even if it's no longer a church, to
Right.
be reused as something else, thinking its purpose again. I do have a couple of questions in the chat. I'll let you answer it to make sure I don't mess that one up.
Okay.
Where does Destination Crenshaw begin and end?
So it began where we have Sankofa Park. Sankofa Park, which is right here. So this right here, we have Leimert Park is over here to the right. And then we have Vernon Boulevard. And then we have El Cholo, there's a chicken place there.
El Polo,
Polo.
Pollo Loco.
Correct.
Right.
And then Tavis Smiley building is right there. And it begins right here at the Sankofa Park. So I normally say it starts south of Vernon, and it goes to Slauson.
And for those that may drive it and not remember the streets as well, where Crenshaw veers left and it makes a wishbone with a street called Leimert Boulevard, that's where he's talking about, where
Exactly.
if you point to that, Drake, well, where the park is, that's where the split, the wishbone happens.
That's correct.
That's
Crenshaw is this way, and Leimert Boulevard goes straight. And the park is in the middle.
And what year will everything be completed?
Next year.
We could say, I've heard that the train will be operational sometime in the fall.
I've heard that too. I've heard the same. We're going to be done next year, probably around June.
Now, is everything simultaneously? Because you have things like the Great Wall by the Crenshaw High School mural, and you have small pocket parks like the ones at Slauson versus the massive Sankofa Park.
They're shooting to have everything done. They're still raising funds. This project is not 100% funded yet, but they're still raising funds. So if anyone has a few $1 million in their pocket, they're still looking for some money, but it's planned to be done.
Okay. So please, anyone, you have any questions?
That was for Mark, just in case Mark might have a few million laying around.
You see, Mark, is Mark Graham here?
No, this is Mark. I'm looking at the instructor, Mark.
Oh yeah, Mark, yeah. That's funny. Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to ask. It's a great time to ask. And my group that's doing the student design competition certainly should be asking questions that might pertain to the pocket and micro parks in themselves. Don't make Mark come after you.
Yeah. But the important thing I wanted to leave though is this, the idea of storytelling and the idea of looking at the culture and how can you implement that within your designs. And so that's really that's why I showed the two projects, because I think they do a good job at that. That's the important part. The other part too, I didn't go over this, but I do it now. You can see this tall Crenshaw sign here. This Crenshaw sign here is being proposed at Slauson, which is right here. And then the reason we have this here at Slauson is because it becomes a bookend for the project. This is one end with the tall tower. And then back in Leimert Park, you have the Vision Theater, which has a tower as well. So we kind of created this two tower, the Leimert Park Tower, the Vision Theater, and then the Crenshaw Tower back here. And we also did a study on how tall should it be. And we wanted it to be tall enough so that you could see it at nighttime from the airplane landing at LAX as you're flying in. We wanted people to be able to look out and see the tower lit up at top. So it's designed for that as well.
And I did have one question. Is that available? What is the name of the app to view the wall? Is that up and running yet?
No, it's not. Still on the way.
And for those that muraled wall is famed because is it not Crenshaw High School that was the one that actually was always the artist drawing on the wall? They would change it
Actually, the artists who worked on the original wall are still living, and they have been commissioned to upgrade the wall. So they're going to redo it.
I mean, it has changed over the years. It has
That's
evolved.
correct.
It's been painted.
Yeah.
It's been a prominent feature in the neighborhood forever.
Yeah.
So that is a really kind of cool thing. And for those that don't really know the neighborhood, so Leimert Park and Baldwin Hills were these kind of majestic architectural gem communities that were really all white in the 50s, 60s, 40s as they evolved. And as affluent African Americans started moving in, there is a term that we know that was starting to happen, and it was called white flight. And in the late 60s and 70s, it all of a sudden became largely African American. So if you saw the movie on Ray Charles bringing his bride in, that's where he came. Motown artists came and moved there, and it became the prominent thing. Not that they designed it, but it's certainly a neighborhood as architectural students that you'd want to drive through and check out, because the homes are really sort of nice in there. And that was a time where things were opened up, because prior to the 70s, late 60s on back, many areas in the city, Blacks were not allowed to actually buy in those neighborhoods. And as things started to open up, that's where we wind up where we wind up. So it evolved into now what is a historically Black community. Just out of it is what it is. And so Nipsey Hussle and Marquise Dawson wanted to make sure, as the new train comes in and things are running through, that these pocket parks and art installations would do what Drake is saying, tell a story that it's not forgotten, because many of you wouldn't know. You didn't live there. You didn't live through those periods, and you wouldn't know. I already getting texts from people. I did not know that pop locking, the dude went to Lock High. So I do know Lock, but it's funny all the history we all can learn as these stories are told, because over time, the people that knew him aren't around.
They had back in the day, this story is going to be told, but they had a very prominent air show. It It was an all-female black hair show. They used to fly planes and do tricks here in LA. A lot of people don't know about that. But there's history and documentation. These are the type of stories you'll learn. And again, the idea behind this is the youth will learn. It become kind of a outdoor school, but also the idea is for tourism, to bring people, for economic development. It will help, be a location for maybe people want to visit and learn some things, and not only learn things, but also go to Leimert Park and be entertained at the Vision Theater and see a singing group, or go to a nice restaurant on Crenshaw, things of that sort. So economic development is also part of this.
But I certainly thank you, Drake, for doing this. I like the overarching theme, and I hope students walk away with that, how a site has history, and when you come to design it, they didn't just build a site, it was there already. So sometimes you want to tell the story of the site, or at least give a nod to it as you're designing. And if you take cues from looking back at that history, it could help inspire what you're designing. That's the big takeaway.
Yeah.
I hope you all get. I did see a question. What impact did the construction have on the community economically?
Yeah, well, actually, I was trying to address that question in terms of the future. And that is, we are hoping that economically, it will have a very positive impact on the community. It will help bring tourism. It would help bring economic development. It would uplift the community, be a source of we have different areas in town where we want to go to Beverly Hills, Koreatown, and all of these things. So rather than going to Leimert Park, and it becomes more global. It becomes Leimert Park plus other things as well.
And
There's
certainly the train line is helping with that, obviously.
Yeah, you got to stop at Leimert Park. The train stop there. I kind of missed that part, but you have to stop there, and you also have to stop at Slauson. But so yeah, it's right in line with that. And
a question came: who thought of the grassroots concept?
Good question. It's a mixture. There's a book called God, I forget her name, but it's Full of Love. I don't quote me on this, but it's a book that's actually is out now, and she talks a little bit about that relationship. Zena Howard, who is our facilitator for the project, and she's also the one who worked on the museum in DC. She's the principal of the project that really brought it to the project and kind of framed it in a way that we can use it. So it was part of her and part of this book that she read and took some things from.
The kind of inspiration that reminds me of, if you actually look into the history of Frank Lloyd Wright's Hollyhock House up in Hollywood, he designed it with the motifs that's in his Usonian blocks after a particular plant, which is the hollyhock.
Exactly right. That having those inspirations from something is very important. I'm a true believer in that. And it's all around us. We just have to find it and use it.
The question came in also: are they going to keep the art area in Leimert Park?
Keep the art here. I'm not sure what they mean by art.
Do you mean go ahead and just speak out there, Ramona, but I believe you're just talking about the whole park that is in Leimert Park and the art area in Degnan and all of that.
Yes, thanks so much. Great information, by the way.
Sure.
Yeah, the art area where they have the theater and they had a lot of shops and little cafes.
Well, I have good news and bad news.
Okay, okay,
Well, let me start with the good news first.
okay.
The Vision Theater, as you probably know, it has been redone. And it's going to be reopening, I think, the end of this year. The inside has been redone, restored. They have a new stage in the back where they can do plays. It's going to seat like 900 people. So it's going to be a great theater. And there's going to be top-notch singing groups, jazz groups. There's going to be plays there. It's going to be everything. It's going to be great. The other best kept secret about that building is that on the corner of it, it's been boarded up for like about 3 or 4 years. There's just boards across the front of it. Behind those boards, they design and build. It was never opened. A restaurant. It's going to be a kind of a speakeasy type restaurant. There's going to be entertainment. You could go to, before you go to the show, the theater, you can go there and eat, dine. That's already built and designed. It's just boarded around and no one knows it's there. So that's another good news. So that's going to happen. That's there. Leimert Park, the shops that are there are old. And the concept of commercial and the street and cars are kind of at war with each other. I think there's this calling out of, we want this to be a great location where we have artists and we have restaurants and we have places you can go buy gifts, but the cars kind of get in the way. So there are several projects on the board now to do some things different over there. There's one project which you might know started construction a few weeks ago. They tore down the building across the street from the McDonald's. So this is the backside of Leimert Park. That's now, that building is gone. And they started construction, and it's going to be a mixed use building. There's going to be housing above, commercial below. And they're also looking at doing something where hot and cold, and there's a clothing store restaurant. I can't remember the name of it, but they're talking about doing something new there. But the idea is to continue with the same commercial concept, but put residential above it. Some people are against the residential component, and some are in support of it.
And for those that may be familiar with an area similar, I would say that's kind of like Larchmont, but adding the residential above it,
Correct.
kind of a community. It's what Drake is saying with what Degnan is right now. It's a walkable area. The cars are in it, and it's kind of at war there too. But your question, Ramona, is will it change? This project is not a part of that, but
Oh, okay. I didn't know. Okay.
No, it's not.
this project ends at Vernon.
Okay.
So it ends south of it.
But I
Right.
still think Leimert Park, no matter what happens, it remains the kind of the cultural area for the area there, the cultural component, the creativity, the music. I think that's going to always be there.
I
You're
hope
gonna-
so.
You're
I
gonna
hope
have
so.
you're gonna have a commercial part. You might just have residentials above it. That's all.
Right.
But
Okay.
It's good.
Yeah.
I think another example of that, better example, I think would be San Diego. And not so much Larchmont, there's no commercial, but there's no residential.
Well, yeah,
Oh.
I meant just the commercial below in that kind of walking. But you're right, the
But
gas lamp district.
San Diego's a better example, I think, of commercial, of residential above and a commercial below.
Right. So a
Is which-
couple.
What
Go ahead,
neighborhood?
Mark.
I was gonna say, what neighborhood were you thinking, Drake?
Oh, and San Diego, I'm talking about the gas lamp area.
Oh, yeah. But also I was gonna say Santa Monica has
Yeah,
great areas of
yeah, that's true.
residential above. West Hollywood.
Yeah.
Has a lot of that. So, and it's often, just for the students, often referred to as mixed use.
Mixed use, right?
It's a great opportunity to build critical mass around, especially around transit stops.
Yeah.
And so a lot of cities are advocating commercial and residential near subway stations, bus stops, anything that has major that connects to the public transportation. The
Yeah,
idea is you don't need your car,
yeah.
right? You walk out your apartment, you go down to the bakery or the restaurant below, breakfast, you go to the cleaners down the street, you hop onto a bus, go to work, or hop on the train.
That's the idea, Mark, and I support the mixed use concept. I'm also on a design review board for Crenshaw, and I will tell you from reality in terms of Crenshaw, and actually the mayor has been this has been brought before the mayor as well. The idea, as you indicated, with metro lines and stops, is to have more of a building up the area more with the units of apartments and things like that, a high density kind of living, because you use metro, you use transportation, no cars. You got TLC 4, which I won't get into that, but basically it allows you to build in an area with no cars, no parking spaces for cars. And we have a few of that going on now in Crenshaw, around Leimert Park, actually. And the first one that was put in with no parking, of course, the train station is not operational yet. But to me was lacking is that there is no control from the person who's renting the units. They don't control who have a car or who don't have a car.
Yeah.
So most of the people who move in now are people with cars.
Yeah.
They have no place to park those cars. So now those cars go elsewhere. They either stay on the street, they get ticket, or they go around the block to a residential area and park them in front of someone's house, which is what they do. And now you have the community around it up in arms saying, this is not working. This is crazy. How can you build housing with no places to park cars?
Right.
So we have a big mess happening right now in real time. And we haven't seen anything yet because we just started building. We just started.
Right. Well, one of the, I can't speak for Santa Monica, but I know in West Hollywood, they are devoting a lot of money towards parking garages. So sometimes parking garages above commercial that are open to residents who live in nearby buildings. And so it's also about unbundling the parking from the unit, meaning you buy the unit and you have a choice of whether or not you want a space. You want to buy a space. So it's separating those two components and sort of having a different model as a way of getting people to determine whether or not they need a car. And so some of the data shows that the newer generations, the younger generations, they're not so quick to go out and buy a car as older generations are. So to give them options to travel without the use of car, ultimately is a benefit. So, but I totally understand. And you kind of answered my question, why the pushback on residential? And I thought it was more about taking away commercial, right? There's this whole notion that, well, if you put residential, that means less businesses. We need more businesses. I mean, that's the common thinking. But I think you're right. The parking might be the issue, thinking that it's going to increase parking and traffic problems in their neighborhood.
And where is that? Yeah. Which is funny. One of the questions came in, Drake, with the Vision Theater being expanded as it is, where's the parking for the Vision Theater? In that 9.
They do, as you know, they have parking in the back. It's the construction site right now, but there's parking in the back there. There's proposals to develop that. So, but there's parking for the Vision Theater there, and there's also parking behind the commercial shops on day end. There's a big parking lot back there.
And I certainly can't emphasize enough what Drake started with this, where community makes a difference. They were not going to have a train stop at Leimert Park. They almost weren't going to have one at King Boulevard, right?
That's right.
So they were going to go from virtually at Expo and Crenshaw and bypass all the way to Slauson.
That train was to get people downtown to the airport. It was not thinking about Crenshaw. It was the airport.
And that changes what this community will be. There is a question, I won't leave it out because it was here. Is there an advantage to the dispersed approach to the allocation of construction versus concentrated in one area? Example, sustainability, cost, accessibility, beautification, etc. Did I state that well enough? Medford, if you want to
I
unmute
don't
yourself.
think I
Medford,
understood.
you want to try and quote that yourself?
Hey, can you guys hear me just okay?
Yes.
So I guess what I was asking is there's 10 pocket parks, 8 different art installments, about 50 different murals, and a dozen different narratives about the people who are indigenous to that area. But I was wondering, is there an advantage to spreading it out across the entire 1.3 miles versus creating one centralized place that housed all of these different things in one location? So was there like a cost benefit to doing several smaller projects or versus one larger project? Did you find any advantages in terms of the less construction materials? It was just being able to be built faster, things of that nature.
Really, it came from the advisory council. When we had our meetings, we didn't really have any ideas of this, you know, of what was going to happen in this area. We had no idea. But I think as we met with people and we sat down, we listened, the idea of having something along the 1.3 mile on both sides of the street. I think the idea was to have something interesting on both sides of the street, not just one side and not just at one point, but distributed throughout the 1.3 mile. And that came from the groups, that came from the community, the many meetings that we had.
And a question came up, who drove the campaign to include Crenshaw in the use of the rail line? I think you mean with getting those stops put in place.
No, I think they might mean just getting Crenshaw to go to the airport, because before your time and before my time, there were different options in terms of how to get to the airport. They actually had a line going, I think, to Santa Monica to go to the airport. And that's before everybody's time. But I think it was just, how do you get to the airport? I think the Santa Monica did not happen because I think it was not centralized. It was too far west, and it was too much Santa Monica, and it was far away from downtown. And so I think the Crenshaw became the better location. And also too, I hate to say this, but a lot of times, as I said before, and you know this, a lot of times these rail lines get put where you have the least resistance. I could see them trying to go down Santa Monica, and people in Santa Monica say, you must be crazy. And it won't happen. And then you say you go down Crenshaw, it's less resistance. That's the history of a lot of transportation around this country.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Drake. I think I was trying to ask, what campaign did it take to make this rail line run in that direction, but also the frequent stops that you are going to be including? Was there a campaign that had to take place to make that possible, rather than just having 2 terminating points?
Yeah, well, they added 2 stations because the community was protesting.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because the community participation and being active in this project. So they added 2 stations. Now, the community also wanted the Metro line to stay low grade, but they didn't win that war. They lost that battle. so part of the line was below grade, but then it came up at Vernon.
It was
and-
kind of a semi-win, right? Because
Right.
there was a talk of putting it above grade, like second level. And they said, oh, no, not here. You are not doing that here.
Right.
So the
exactly.
compromise was to be on grade at areas. And the reality is the reason why it went below grade where it does is because Crenshaw gets narrow and there's no way for it to be on grade at that point. It would either have to be above grade or below grade. And the community did major pushback to say, you are not giving me above grade, so put it below grade, do what you have to do. And then the community also fought for not just bypassing Leimert Park itself. So definitely community activism
That's correct.
does work, because both of those things would have happened. It would have been above grade and it would have bypassed the community
Correct.
in itself. Well, if looks like that's kind of it. If anybody has any last question, I think this was great discussion and I hope everybody enjoyed it.
And everybody know about Destination Crenshaw now, so they could go tell someone else.
Yep. And you don't even have to wait for the train line, because where you are at El Camino, you just have to take the bus, because the trains are not coming down there anyway.
Right.
If you know the area, it basically turns at Florence and starts to go west,
Toward the
and
other.
Florence turns into aviation. So it goes to the foot of LAX at that point. But you can right now, which I vow to start to have in this school year, have a trip every so often where we take our students to some different places, such as 3rd Street Promenade. They've never been, downtown LA. And certainly we'll visit this when the train line kicks in, so that you start to see different communities and how they've developed and evolved. It will help you as you are designing your own architecture.
Freudian slip there.
Yeah, there we go. So if that's it, folks, thanks again for joining us. And yep, everybody is saying, Dan, one of the full-time props is saying thanks, Drake, and Medford saying thank you. Everybody thanks you for bringing this to light. I did want to get it in now because some of our students will be able to use this as they finish up their design on the NOMAS student design competition.
Well, you're quite welcome. I wish we were live. I would have loved to have done it live, but nonetheless, we do the best we can. But I enjoyed it, and so you're welcome.
All right.
I'll be
Well,
talking
take
to you.
care, everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, guys.